On your Monday episode of Locked On Raptors, I love Darko. The players love Darko. Everybody loves Darko, including the dudes who sign the checks.
You are Locked On Raptors, your daily Toronto Raptors podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, what's going on? And welcome to another episode of Locked On Raptors, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, March the 31st, and I am your host, Sean Woodley. I've been covering the Toronto Raptors now for 11 seasons on various platforms. You can find all my work over on Blue Sky, that is. You can also find the show on Instagram, and you can join us in the Discord. Great little listener community we got building around the show. Lots of fun stuff. Congratulations to Cause, the winner of the Locked On Raptors Fantasy Basketball League. Oh, God, I have to have him on the show now, don't I? Come hang out. Great little place to come be part of our listener community. Of course, you can subscribe for free to the daily Locked On Raptors newsletter. QR code on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. Link in the description of the podcast if you're listening on audio. And it's wonderful. It's free. It's good stuff. It's good blogs from me 5 days a week. Katie Heindel 4 days a week. League at Large pieces. Michael Shearer basketball poetry every Thursday. It's all there for the low price of $0. So go sign on up, would you? Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Down the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your purchase. And we are off and running here on a Monday edition of Locked On Raptors, talking about a couple of games that happened, I guess. We'll eventually talk about some takeaways from the Raptors comfortably taking down the very bad Charlotte Hornets and the somehow even worse right now Philadelphia 76ers on Friday and Sunday. We will also get to the good, the bad, and the from the weekend that was, with maybe a little bit of a dip dive into NCAA basketball stuff and prospect talk. But off the top, we should talk about the actual news about the Toronto Raptors that dropped yesterday. And I guess it's technically breaking news because Michael Grange, of course, very plugged in Toronto Raptors man for Sportsnet, broke it yesterday. But this has, I guess, been solidified for quite a while. But the news came down yesterday in a piece by Michael Grange about Darko Rajaković having his option not just for next year, but for 2026-27 picked up by the Toronto Raptors before this season even began. Which you might be saying, wow, that's crazy. After 1 year where the team wins 25 games, the Raptors have kind of given this vote of confidence to Darko Rajaković for his fourth theoretical season with the team. And yeah, it's a little unorthodox, but I also think it's completely the right decision. I think it is clearly the right call for the Raptors to sort of give this vote of confidence to their head coach, Darko Rajaković, who, to me, so far through 2 seasons, yeah, they've won 53 games, 52 games, whatever it is over the course of his first 2 seasons in Toronto. They're not exactly racking up the dubs so far. But again, a lot of that's been by design. The Toronto Raptors last year were this kind of misshapen mess of an end of an era and the start of another one that kind of just barely got off the ground before a whole bunch of injuries happened. You could explain a lot of what happened last year and sort of pin it mostly on the front office for setting up a very, let's say, chaotic ecosystem for that team to exist within last year. This year, at Media Day, the front office came out and said, yeah, we're not trying to be very good. It's about the draft this year, baby. And Darko Rajaković, obviously, he's coaching this team as best he can. I think he's found a nice balance of, yes, they're trying to fulfill the assignment of losing basketball games and optimizing draft position while also doing player development. And I think so far, you can't give Darko Rajaković anything but passing marks for what he's done with this team in 2 years. The edict when he came in, the mandate, the day he was hired in the summer of 2023 was, we got to get back to our roots as a player development organization. We got to get back to bringing dudes along and making players better within our system, within our laboratory. And all told, been an absolute home run of a success for Darko Rajaković in that department. We saw last year Scotty Barnes had the best year of his career. He took this gigantic leap as an offensive player. He, made some strides defensively after struggling in years 1 and 2. This year, the offensive stuff, you grant this, it's been a step back for him offensively this season. I also think there's some contextual reasons for that. missing the point guard that's supposed to run the team for the first half of the year, that's not so helpful. You had a lot of Scotty Barnes creating from the top in an offense where Scotty Barnes creating from the top was kind of their only path to shot creation in the half court. You have obviously, since Quickley's come back, the efficiency has tailed even further off for Scotty Barnes. I think a lot of that is probably attributable to one, just the season kind of being off the rails this last month or so and things not really being fully locked in for anybody. And also, I just think, the team context very clearly, it's going to shift when Brandon Ingram plays. The team made a trade to address the offensive limitations of Scotty Barnes as a guy who can carry a massive creative burden. He hasn't played with Brandon Ingram yet. And so I kind of just don't care about the offensive struggles overall over this last little stretch. And maybe that makes me a Scotty Homer or a Rube or whatever. But I genuinely think the context of this team is going to be way more conducive to Scotty Barnes being successful once you have Quickley and Ingram both taking a big portion of that creation burden that rests largely on Scotty Barnes' shoulders to start this year. The offensive stuff, sure, we'll wait and see. Maybe they can't kind of rein him in. Maybe they can't take the experimentation stuff from this year, pick out the best parts and use it as sort of the basis of his game next year. If so, that's probably a failure in part on the coaching staff for how they've deployed Scotty Barnes. But let's not worry about that till we actually run into that problem is kind of my view on that. And also there's the whole thing of, Scotty Barnes became a guy who's like definitely going to make a bunch of all defense teams this season. He has become himself like an outstanding fulcrum defensive player for a team that has been surprisingly good on defense over the last half of the year. Admittedly, some of that is March business and playing against terrible teams, but they were pretty good on defense even before the schedule turned to absolute butter. My thing here too is, if you're talking about Darko fulfilling the assignment, it's not just Scotty Barnes' development, right? RJ Barrett became a brand new player under Darko and completely revolutionized his game. What does that mean for the long-term future of him with Toronto? Still an open question, but he's unquestionably a better player today than he was when he left the New York Knicks. You have Grady Dick took a big step this year. We've kind of forgotten about Grady Dick because he's been hurt for the last month or so, but he took a legitimate, massive step at the start of this season in particular with a huge burden on his shoulders. I think that caught up to him for sure. He was overextended to start the year. You saw the physical just sort of toll of that take place or take hold over the course of the season. But considering where Grady Dick was the day he came to Toronto versus where he is now, night and day, another success of player development. The Raptors, we've talked about the vaunted 2024 draft class a bunch of guys who, still have a lot of work to do to carve out long-term niches in the NBA. But how can you not be thrilled about the steps made by Jacoby Walter and Jamison Battle and Jamal Shed and Jonathan Mobo this season? That's player development at work. It's putting guys in situations where they can be optimized and having them go to work. It's been great. We've seen Ochai Agbaji go from barely an NBA player to, oh, wow, that guy's surely an NBA player. Like, it's been pretty awesome to see the sort of top to bottom overhaul of the developmental system. And part of this is like they didn't have picks for a couple of years as part of the tax of winning the championship and then them kind of chasing that dream a little bit too long. That's part of why the development thing fell apart. But also Nick Nurse just didn't like to play more than 7 players a night. And that also hurt the development of a lot of guys. Be really fascinated to see what Precious Achiuwa's development looks like under Darko Rajaković for multiple seasons, as opposed to what it was at the tail end of his time with the Raptors under Nick Nurse. Just a thought. Either way, he's fulfilled the assignment of the developmental side of things without a doubt. The team feels like they can take guys and turn them into something now in a way they just kind of lost their way with for a few seasons under Nick Nurse near the tail end. I also think if you're just looking at what the goals were stated to be by Darko Rajaković himself at the start of his first season and his second season, he's 2 for 2 on nailing those things. In year 1, the goal was develop players, yes, but also install a set of offensive principles that define how this team is going to play. And boy, oh boy, did they ever. Even when the team was playing Jordan Nwora and Malik Williams down the stretch last year, they were playing Darko Rajaković basketball. They were creating good shots. The system, and it still has been the case this year, the way the Raptors play is conducive to creating good shots. They are a team that lives at the rim, the place that you want to be living in order to get the best shots available to you on a basketball court. Yeah, the 3-point volume is not there. I also think that's partly a function of Darko looking at his team and saying, hey, Why do this thing we're clearly not good at? We don't have a lot of shooting. Let's focus on a thing we can do, which is get to the rim. And I do think you've seen the 3-point volume and the accuracy kind of tick up as you've seen more guys with a little bit more 3-point juice find their way into the lineup over the course of this season. And I think that's only going to be a steady upward trajectory from here. You know, I think the offensive stuff, obviously, this has not been a good offensive season for the Raptors. Again, I think a lot of it is due to their point guard wasn't available for the first half of the year. We've seen what Quickley does to just kind of change the shape of the floor with his shooting. Not having him for 40 games to start the year was a big deal. I'm sorry if you don't agree. It absolutely was a big reason why the team fell off a cliff in December, why they just really couldn't get rolling. The offense, I think, is going to be fine. They still create good shots. And once Brandon Ingram's involved, they're going to have someone who's capable of making those shots in a way they just haven't really had so far, while also putting everyone else in a position in the hierarchy where the shots they do get, they'll be in a bit better position to connect on as well. And then you look at this year's goal, right? The goal for this year with Darko Rajaković was we got to figure out how to play some defense. We stunk on defense last year. We were like a bottom 3 or 4 defense in the league. It was just, people just kind of dancing through us like melted butter, and it was bad. And this year, the whole goal was let's establish a defensive identity. And boy, oh boy, again, have they ever done it? I had my doubts of this whole you're going to have high pickup points and be really aggressive on the ball. And, I didn't really think that was going to be how this team succeeded just because I thought they had maybe 1 or 2 guys who could actually do that defensively. But you factor in, the emergence of Jamal Shed. You factor in Immanuel Quickley being a damn good defensive player since he came back and got healthy as well. With the back line that is Jakob Poeltl and Scotty Barnes, absolutely demons back there, putting up really good defensive numbers anytime they're on the floor together. And all of a sudden, this team is a top 10 defense since January the 1st, which is now over half of the season. That's really encouraging stuff, even if some of it's inflated by March. They were still very good in January and February as well. Mission accomplished on forging a defensive identity this year. I talked about this on Friday. They have to do more to, I think, sort of reinforce the defense. They need more two-way talent on this team for sure to ensure this isn't smoke and mirrors. But if you're talking about taking a set of goals and then achieving them, it's 2 for 2 so far for Darko Rajaković in terms of the broader season-long goals for what he wanted to see from his team. Next year, obviously, is where the rubber meets the road and where it all has to come together. And that's where he's going to ultimately be fully judged, right? A lot of stuff that we just don't quite know yet. There are going to be expectations next year. They might be in the playoffs next year. We don't know what Darko's going to do in the tactical meat grinder that is the postseason. But the way he draws up his stuff now, he draws beautiful out of bounds plays. He draws all kinds of really fun, inventive sets in the half court. The way they've schemed their defense seems to be working. I think Darko's got the juice and the goods when it comes to tactical basketball as well. He's not just a good vibes guy, but also he's a good vibes guy. And that rules. The way he's maintained the vibes for this team through 2 seasons of intense losing, where it's really easy to lose the plot. It's really easy to lose the room. It's easy to have guys and their individual motivations kind of sour what's going on within your team dynamic. Doesn't seem to be a hint of that right now. Everyone seems pretty thrilled to be part of the Toronto Raptors at the moment. And this is all just publicly facing stuff. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but overall, seems like things are pretty good overall in terms of just everyone being happy to come to work every day. Not an easy thing to achieve. And for coaches in today's NBA, it's kind of a huge deal. And Darko has shown he can be a man of the people. He can be a guy who is friendly with players while also holding them to account. He's ditched the silly pizza party stuff from year 1, evolved into a more serious coach, I think, in year 2. I think he's given all the reason to give him the benefit of the doubt going into year 3 as things really get serious and the rubber hits the road. It's not to say he's going to succeed for sure, but I do think what he's done through 2 years totally warrants the vote of confidence the Raptors have given him by picking up that option for year 4. I think he's going to get some runway next year too. If they start poorly, I don't see them firing him in the first month of the season. If they start 5-15 or whatever it is, I think there's going to be some time and grace here. And I think that's how this front office operates, right? They are patient. They take time with coaches. They value stability, continuity, all of that stuff. I don't think Darko's going anywhere anytime soon. This news kind of suggests that. And I think the Raptors got a good one here, man. I really do. And he's a refreshing kind of guy, of course, after the Nick Nurse era where, boy, oh boy, was that odious by the end. I think Darko himself is just it's easy to root for a guy who, by all accounts, and for my interactions with him, limited as they are, just seems like a good, nice guy. It's nice to have a nice guy have some success. It's long overdue for that in basketball and the world, for like nice dudes to also be able to carve out a successful career in a profession, coaching, that sometimes requires you to be a bit of a dick. And Darko is anything but that, at least publicly facing. And yeah, anyway, I'm thrilled that Darko's going to be around. I like Darko a lot. I think he's done everything he can have done under the circumstances these first couple seasons to warrant this vote of confidence. And he's going to be around a while. I think it's just. We're going to come back on the other side. I ran long there with my exuberance for Darko Rajaković. It's like I had a Darko espresso off the top. We're going to come back on the other side and get into some weekend takeaways from the games against the Hornets and the Sixers, if there are any. We'll do that coming up in just 1 second. Today's show is brought to you by friends over at Game Time. And look, it is just the best place to go buy tickets for sporting events. Full stop. I use it all the time. And now that baseball season's back, let me tell you, Game Time, I use them for Jays tickets routinely. I try to go to like 4, 5, 6 games every summer if I can. And I'm going to have to load up in the early part of the year because I'm going to have a baby in the summer. So I don't think I'll be making the excursion to games in the evenings all that much in July and beyond. But in the first few months of the season, get some tickets on Game Time. You're gonna have a great time. You're gonna be able to go for cheap and find good seats within what is a pretty fun place to see a game now these days. Nothing like watching baseball live. It's just like, for me, it's the way I catch up with my friends. I go hang out, talk talk with my pals, watch some sports as they're happening kind of passively in front of me. I love it. And Game Time, again, is the way that I go ahead and do that. If you haven't been to the new stadium since they renovated and you want to know what the seat views look like, you can go find those seat views on Game Time as well. Super easy to use. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Down the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Well, it's game time, of course. Back at it here after running long. Sorry to my boss in the first segment there. Let's get into some weekend takeaways from the Raptors taking on the Hornets 108-97 on Friday, and then a 127-109 pasting of the Ricky Council-led Philadelphia 76ers. I mean, am I supposed to have opinions on these games? These are just games that are taking place kind of without any sort of fanfare or implication or stakes. They're just kind of there. The Raptors have all of a sudden won 4 straight games, which is kind of hilarious. 3 wins back, 3.5 games overall back at the Spurs in the standings, 3 games up, I suppose, on 7th spot in the lottery odds. Maybe you feel like, oh no, it's getting a little hairy right now. They're potentially going to slip down. The Raptors' odds of finishing 7th actually slightly improved over the weekend with their 2 wins. They went from 92.2% odds of finishing 7th to 92.5 over the weekend, if that helps you sleep at night a little bit, if you're worried about falling to 8th. They've now got virtually 0 chance of moving into 6th. They've got too many games up on the Nets now with way too few games to play, but they're only at a 6.5% chance of falling down to number 8. They probably need like 2, maybe 3 losses to lock this thing up, even though the Spurs are bad and have a pretty difficult schedule down the stretch. Having a difficult schedule down the stretch means you might be playing some teams that aren't really playing for anything. I think they have the Cavs on deck at one point. Some other teams that might be kind of out of trying and sort of in rest mode before the playoffs. They also, interestingly enough, play the Toronto Raptors in the final game of the season. And if you like tanktastic basketball, I guess your hope is that they're tied in wins going into that last game of the season. We could see some true chicanery between those teams in that last game if things are still up in the air, which again, they probably won't be. The Raptors this week have games against Chicago, who's like trying right now. Don't believe the March Bulls, by the way. I've seen a lot of people get duped by the March Bulls. Do it at your own peril, I guess, but sure, they're really, really ripping their way through the dregs of the Eastern Conference up to that 9th spot. An absolute juggernaut of basketball, the best team that ever existed for sure. No, definitely. It's going to keep going like this into the playoffs and definitely into next year. But certainly they're trying right now. They're incentivized to win. It's probably a loss for the Raptors tomorrow night, even if they play Quickley and Poeltl. I would imagine they will be quite delicate with the minutes they roll them out for. Of course, the Raptors keep on winning when Quickley and Poeltl play together because they're damn good. We'll get into that in a sec. But yeah, that's probably a loss because Chicago cares right now and the Raptors don't. Portland is an interesting one. They've kind of fallen on hard times. Obviously, the Raptors lost to them narrowly when they played them in Portland recently. That might be a win at home. But then they play the Detroit Pistons, who are in a seeding battle right now, trying to even get home court in the Eastern Conference. They'll be incentivized to go and beat the Raptors. One would assume the Raptors will lose that game. And if they lose 2 games this week, they're probably about set. They're probably going to be in decent position to hold off the Spurs for 7th. But even if they don't, I mean, what, 8th, like 8th, maybe 9th in the draft. You could be 8th or 9th in the draft right now anyway. It's most likely when you're 7th. Like, I don't know. I'm not going to get too hung up over a couple of spots in a draft where I think there are like 10 or 11 guys who I'm kind of into. And, it is what it is. You can only do so much to control for this schedule down the stretch. And man, is this schedule just unbelievable. We'll get into a little bit later on in the good, the bad, and the But as far as like takeaways from the weekend here, I think it's pretty cool to see the Quickley Poeltl pick and roll be so devastating. Poeltl's just like never missing shots now, working that pick and roll with Quickley, working pick and roll with Scotty Barnes as well. Been super effective. He's wildly efficient. He never misses. That's great. Super fun. Big implications for what the team looks like next season for sure. The numbers continue to be really encouraging with Quickley, Barnes, and Poeltl on the floor. Not that the numbers that they picked up against the Hornets on Friday mean anything to that, but it's it's been a recurring trend ever since Quickley got healthy. Whenever he's been on the floor with Poeltl and Barnes, that's great to see. It's nice to see the rookies really taking their minutes and running with them. A lot of Jacoby Walter. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. Jamal Shed continues to rack up big assist totals. His points are kind of creeping up as well. Jamison Battle still bombing threes. Jonathan Mobo's had a couple of nice performances here and there. Hit a corner 3 on Friday. That's always fun to see a 3 go down for him. It's great to see these rookies playing. And look, this is why the Raptors can't lose games right now. Look at the other teams they're playing. Look at the players these other teams are playing. The Raptors could sit everybody. They could sit Barnes. They could sit Poeltl. They could sit Quickley and Barrett and still not have like a guarantee of losing these games, right? You're rolling out against teams that are playing Ricky Council, Marcus Bagley, Alex Reese, Jared Butler, Daquan Jeffries, KJ Simpson, Moussa Diabate. Like, these are guys getting heavy minutes. These teams, the Hornets, the Nets, the Sixers, the teams the Raptors are playing lately, like, they are doing what the Raptors did last year, which is playing a bunch of guys who don't really have any business getting heavy minutes in the NBA, but are doing it just because tanking. And last year's Raptors team, like, I think the number is 14 of the 30 players who played for the Raptors last year no longer in the NBA as of the start of this season. It might be more than that by now. Like, that's crazy. And this is the type of player that is taking up like half the rotation minutes for the teams the Raptors have on the schedule right now. It's crazy that the schedule broke this way. It's unfortunate the schedule broke this way, but it just is what it is. And I don't think the Raptors, yes, they could, in theory, sit everybody down. I don't think it's actually going to mean all that much. Like, yeah, you blow out the Sixers by 18 with Scotty and Barrett in. You take those guys out, you still might win that game because of who was playing for the Sixers last night. It's just how desperate and sort of shamelessly these teams are to tank. Like, it's what are you going to do? Some other good stuff. Nice to see RJ Barrett spank the Sixers around a little bit. 31-5-5 efficient shooting. Doesn't mean anything because it's against the Sixers. Probably not. Like, whatever. But it's nice to see the Raptors. The sign of like a competent team is taking care of business against teams that are worse than you. And even when the Raptors are not playing their guys, they're just better than these teams. It's nice to see them playing fun, functional, connected basketball, even if it's coming with slight implications for the lottery and potentially, having the unlikely happen and falling into 8th. It is what it is, man. I think overall, watch these games. They're fun, reasonably for moments here and there. We're past the point of there being legitimate hard basketball takeaways to be had here. It just is what it is. We're going to come back on the other side, get into the good, the bad, and we'll talk a little bit about the Duke boys who had themselves a big weekend and are now in the Final Four. apparently I just like Duke basketball right now. It's sickening, frankly, but they're cool and fun. So what are you going to do? We're also going to get into the bad, of course. We'll do that coming up in just one sec. Back at it here on your Monday edition of Locked On Raptors with the good, the bad, and the We wrap up every single episode of this here podcast on the heels of a Toronto Raptors basketball game. In this case, two games. In this case, two games that are like air quotes games. They just kind of happened. We will have a couple of thoughts from the actual games the Raptors played over the weekend, but there was other basketball played with higher stakes this weekend that I also wanted to find a way to infuse into here because look, we're all draft little nuts here now. We're looking ahead to June, looking ahead to the combine next month. It's draft season. And so, yeah, let's remark upon the Duke prospects, the biggest prospects still remaining in the March Madness field. Of course, Cooper Flagg, Con Knipple, Kaman Malawash, all of them performing quite well in their couple games over the weekend. Cooper Flagg on Thursday night, I think it was, in Duke's quarterfinal game against Arizona. My God, really, I guess it was a Sweet 16, but man, Cooper Flagg, just like full on like star player aura in that game. I think he had 30, like 6 and 7 or something crazy like that. He's amazing. He's just like, he's kind of got the goods, man. Like sometimes you get to see with a guy, oh, that guy just like carries himself like the best player on a good team. And that's kind of the vibe you get with Cooper Flagg. Very unselfish player, very sort of, he doesn't fall into the sort of trap that a lot of, one and done college stars do where it's like, yeah, I'm just kind of here to hang it. Like it seems like Cooper Flagg genuinely is like in it to win it. And that's great. Then you have my guy, Kaman Malawash. Both of these games really effective. His rim protection is nuts. Even though he doesn't like rack up crazy block totals, he just averaged north of 1 block a game this season. He's contesting and disrupting everything that goes up within like an 8-foot radius of the basket. He's just so enormous. Turns out being large in basketball, very helpful if you want to be good at basketball. And obviously he like never misses anything at the rim. There was some stuff in that game of Friday where, or on Thursday, where it just like the gravity he has as a roll man is so present, so obvious, is a thing defenses are constantly worried about because it's an instant basket when he catches it on the roll. He just never misses. It's awesome. Yeah. And the other thing I love about Kaman Malawash too, you're going to see this every time Duke runs a half court set, and it's amplified because there are 30 seconds of shot clock to work with. But Malawash is just like constantly looking for, where can I set a screen for someone? I'm gigantic. It's probably useful if I set a screen for somebody, whether on or off the ball. He must set like 5 or 6 screens per possession most times down the floor for Duke. Just constantly looking for, how can I help grease things along here? Smart player, understanding of how team basketball works. Super in on Kaman Malawash. He's probably going to be number 3 on my personal board once it all is said and done and draft night comes along. I'm growing ever more concerned he's not going to be there when the Raptors pick, but man, would it be sweet if he were. Maybe some teams will get spooked by the whole, big center thing and, not a ton of offensive upside and, oh, he's kind of raw. Hopefully that's the case because Kaman Malawash is the truth. And I think he's going to be an amazing NBA player. He was very good this weekend. And then Con Knipple, man, like, I don't love him for the Raptors because of positional overlap, and I just think they need a different type of player. I think they need more size or like shot creation, kind of one of those two things. Knipple is just like a damn good shooter and role player type. Him and Malawash have this beautiful chemistry, working pick and roll with one another. That's very fun. So maybe there's some creation upside there with Knipple to tap into, but I genuinely think he's just going to be a really steady two-way role player who shoots lights out of the ball and is a pretty good defender because he's 6'7" and functionally pretty strong and all of that. And so, yeah, this Duke team, eminently likable. It's crazy how much I like this Duke basketball team, but that's where we are. And their game against Houston in the Final Four is going to be an absolute banger because Houston's just like a really nasty team to play against. They are, you can sense the Jamal Shed ghost hanging over that team. Just a real annoyance, and they're damn good too. But yeah, Duke, they're probably going to win it all because they just like are a basically perfect college basketball team. The bad, let's get back to the Raptors stuff, I guess. Look, we've talked about it plenty, but the way the schedule has been set up to close the season for the Raptors, I know this isn't intentional. It's just happenstance. And, they don't make the schedule in mind with, how can we make things least pleasant for the Toronto Raptors in the final 2 months of the season? Like, that's not how this works. But man, it's just like, it's kind of soul sucking right now to watch these games and feel guilty about being kind of happy about a 4-game winning streak because of the potentially negative lottery implications, while also understanding that a 4-game winning streak in March genuinely doesn't mean a damn thing, because the teams they're playing, like, they're just not teams. It's not real, like, representative basketball. It's not a proper context in which to evaluate what's happening. And so, yeah, it's kind of just this purgatory mode. Those who keep on watching the games along with me, you guys are little freaks. I love you. You're like absolute psychos and maybe should be committed. But I'm glad you're doing it because, hey, it's fun. And hey, if you're not watching the games and just tuning into the podcast for detailed breakdowns of the games the Raptors are playing down the stretch, sorry I didn't provide it for this one. These were 2 games that very much were let's watch the all possessions recaps games, not watching live. But hey, again, still some fun stuff going on. It's fun to watch the rookies do some stuff. Speaking of which, let's get to the which is Jacoby Walter being extremely interesting to me, man. The shooting, it's been hit and miss at times. Obviously, similar to his college career, he was a 34% three-point shooter in college, 32.3% so far this year for the Raptors. But I do think his numbers continue to be really dragged down by what were a super bad first 10 games of his NBA career. And look, that's going to happen. A rookie comes in, you miss training camp, you just kind of get plopped into a team and they're like, yeah, figure it out, dude. Obviously, it was going to be a struggle for him. And I don't think the numbers in that early part of the season were terribly representative of what he will be as a player. You know, you take anyone's first 10 games when they're 20 years old, they're probably not going to look their very best. Since that stretch, if you just go the last 38 games of the 48 Walter has played this season, so the lion's share of his games played, nearly half the calendar of the season, he's shooting near 37% from 3, 36.6% on 3.5 attempts a game. That's great. That's really encouraging. He's in the high 40s, nearly 50% on pull-up twos, which is one of the more interesting stats to me. He had himself a pretty decent weekend, not the most efficient weekend in the world, but was 3 of 5 from downtown against the Sixers, had some really nice, just smart, heady plays. Just like dude knows where to be. He had that tap in right at the end of the quarter in that game against the Sixers, just right place, right time. Then he had this crazy baseline save, gets it out to Jamal Shed on the wing, relocates to the corner. Shed hooks him up in the corner, cans the 3. That's like, just little things that Jacoby Walter adds to the mix. The overall statistical profile isn't like thrilling. He's shooting 48% at the rim right now. That's not great. That's sub Grady Dick level. You'd like that to improve, and I'm sure it will as he is no longer 20 years old and frail going into the seasons to come. I think the fact that he gets to the rim 33% of the time he takes a shot, that's huge. That's a really encouraging number. Well into the upper half of the league. Exactly what you want to see for a slashing wing type. And yeah, I think all the Raptors rookies are going to find themselves in bench roles next season for sure. But to me, Walter is easily the guy I can most envision closing games regularly by the time the season's out next year. I think the concept of Quickley with Walter, Ingram, Barnes, and Poeltl, that lineup, I want to see it. I want to see it as much as I can because I think Walter, he's just been this additive piece to all these lineups. His numbers on the floor with like Scotty Barnes and Immanuel Quickley, really encouraging. You go through the lineup data. Some of the Raptors' best, very small sample lineups feature Jacoby Walter. Is that a thing? It might be. It might not be. It's all small sample noise, but he just does all this stuff that just feels like winning basketball player stuff to me. And even though the stats don't back it up just yet, the true shooting is still, high, like low 50s, like 50.4 or something like that. Not great. But I just think the stuff that's going on process-wise here with Jacoby Walter, plus the numbers when you just kind of isolate since the first 10 games, even his true shooting, it's like nearly 54%. Not great, but not terrible. Not, sub 50 or anything like that, like it's been for much of the year. That's all very encouraging stuff to me about what next year looks like for Jacoby Walter. And I just thought he was worthwhile as the today after having a pretty nice weekend where he scored in double figures both nights out. We're going to leave it there. Thank you so much for rocking with the show. As always, please follow, subscribe, rate, review, tell a friend. It's always appreciated when you support the show, however you support the show, whether it's by the newsletter, QR code on the screen, link in the description of the podcast. You can also go to the Discord, link in the description of the podcast as well. 100% free to join. As always, be part of our listener community over there. It's a great time. And yeah, please continue to support, tell a friend, etc., etc. We're only going up from here, baby. Once these games are through, it's full draft mode. Very exciting times. And tomorrow on the show, got something fun planned. Vivek Jacobs going to be along. We're going to go into a bit of a 30th anniversary deep dive on a specific topic, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Stupid little game that we like to play with our pal Big V on the show. So you look forward to that tomorrow. Obviously, lots of games this week. We'll talk about the Bulls game on Tuesday nights. We'll talk about Thursday. We'll get Katie Heindel back on the show this week again. All kinds of good stuff on tap. Thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks for rocking with the show. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye. I got to hit this. Oh my God, it's only getting worse.